Hello, hello! Pizza Packs here with March of the Machine Commander Deck Call for Backup. This is number 3 in our March of the Machine Commander series. Let's see what we get. So, something really cool with these new Commander decks is that they have easy open packaging, so no more needing to bust out a pocket knife or box cutter to get into these, and they just fold out flat like that. Very nice. So inside you will find a black envelope. In that envelope is your March of the Machine Collector Booster Sampler. We'll save that for another video. We're going to have a full 20 to open this time. So, very exciting. And then you will have a pack of plain chase. Yes, plain chase cards. So, and you'll have a couple of pop-out tokens here, and then 11 more on the back. So one this size, and then 10 the regular size. Then you'll have a fold-up deck box with a picture of your commander on the back, colors on the side, and a nice little tuck box top. Commander or the Planeswalker symbol on the front. Then over in the side, the nice thing about this whole thing is it actually folds down. And there's a little tab here that pops through the front that you can pop out, and you've got a spacer and your plain chase die. The one for this deck is purple with silver glitter embedded in and green symbols for Planeswalk and Chaos. Then you have sleeved up your deck, a branded life counter. It's a spin down from 40 to 1, and a little insert. In the insert, we have on one side the special rules for Plane Chase, along with the general rules for Commander. The other side, we have a overview of the face Commander, overview of the deck that comes with it, and a nice little portrait of the Commander itself, which is a little different from their card. So, this one is Light Paws in the Naya colors. So, that's going to be fun. Go ahead and get our packaging squared away. Don't need the spacer anymore. Envelope can go with the other stack. Cool. So that leaves us with our deck. So we've got Bright Palm, Soul Awakener. For 1, a red, green, and a white. Backup 1. Whenever this creature attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. That creature can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. Very nice. So that is the face commander. Let's see what the backup commander is. Shalai and Halar. Now, this one has been said to combo with a ham sandwich. I say this one's more likely to combo with just 2 pieces of bread. So for 1 and the Naya colors are red, green, white, we have Flying, Vigilance. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Halar deals that much damage to target opponent. So this plus Heliod is instant win. So that's a fun one. Plus any number of other things that do the same stuff. So then we've got Command Tower, Command Sphere. We all know what that does by now. Cultivate, it's the same as Kadama's Call? Kadama's Reach. So 2 and a green, sorcery, search your library for 2 basic lands, put them into play tap, or put 1 into play tap, other in your hand, then shuffle. Evolving Wilds, we know what that does. Fertilid, for 2 and a green, you get a 0/0 elemental, comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters, and you can pay 1 and a green, remove a +1/+1 counter to have target player search your library for a land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So it's a rampant growth with legs if you pay extra for it. Keep in mind, you can keep adding counters to it and keep using the ability. We got Fractured Power Stone. Nice card to go in any Playing Chase deck. So it's a mana rock for 2 mana that adds a colorless, and you can also tap it to roll the planar die. You activate that as a sorcery. Hey, now we've got Kadama's Reach. It's a carbon copy of Cultivate. The only difference is this is also arcane, so you can splice onto it. So it is strictly better in that regard. Path of Ancestry, we all know what that does. Pride Malkin. It's for 2 and a green, you get a 2/1 that when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Each creature with a +1/+1 counter on it has Trample. So a lot of synergy. Return to Nature, the strictly better Naturalize. It destroys an artifact, an enchantment, or exiles a card from a graveyard. Terramorphic Expanse, we all know what that does. Good old Wood Elves, basic ramp on a creature. So 1 and a green, or 2 and a green, you get a 1/1 that when it comes into play, you can search for a forest and put it into play. Then shuffle. Now keep in mind that is into play, not into play tapped. And that is any forest, not just basic forest. So this can get triomes, which triomes would be a good, or a triome would be a good upgrade to this mana base. Duels, shocks, anything along those lines. Abzan Battle Priest. This is from Khans of Tarkir, if I remember correctly. Maybe Fate Reforged. So for 3 and a white, you get a 3/2 with Outlast, which is for a white, tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on it, and do that as a sorcery. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has lifelink, so more +1/+1 counter synergy. Abzan Falconeer also has Outlast, so 2 and a white, you get a 2/3. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter has Flying. So far we've got Flying, Lifelink, and Trample. Alaru, Solemn Ritualist, 4 and a white, for a 3/3. When it comes into play, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures. Whenever a non-token creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, create a 1/1 white spirit token with Flying. And it has Partner. So you can have 2 commanders if both have Partner. Very nice. Arcane Signet, we know what that does. Armorcraft Judge, this was from Kaladesh. So 3 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And it's a 3/3. Brawn, good old Brawn. So 3 and a green, 3/3, Trample. But the most important part about this one you generally want to have in your graveyard. As long as it's in your graveyard and you control a forest, creatures you control have Trample. So very nice. Redguard Stronghold, this I believe is from Kaldheim. Comes into play tapped, tap it for a green, a white, green and white, sacrifice it, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. They gain vigilance and lifelink until end of turn, activate as a sorcery. And good old Conclave Mentor, green-white, 2/2. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that may +1 are put on that creature instead. When it dies, you gain life equal to its power, so it's a Hardened Scales with legs. Hardened Scales would likely also be a great addition to this deck. So, looks like we're washing out the text again. Yeah, that works. Then we have Constable of the Realm, so 4 and a white, Renown 2. So when it deals combat damage to a player, if it isn't renowned, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it and it becomes renowned. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put onto Constable of the Realm, exile up to 1 other target non-land permanent until Constable of the Realm leaves the battlefield. Wow. That is super powerful, especially with all of the synergy that we have with +1/+1 counters. Then we have Elite Scale Guard, 4 and a white. I believe this is also from Khans of Tarkir, or Fate Reforged, one of the two. When it enters the battlefield, bolster 2. Choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control and put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it attacks, tap target creature defending player controls. It's a good way to force through your stuff. Enduring Scale Lord. So 4 green and a white for 4/4 flyer. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on another creature you control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Enduring Scale Lord. Very nice. Falkenrath Exterminator, 1 in a green or 1 in a red. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. 2 in a red. It deals damage equal to, or it deals damage to target creature equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Keep in mind, this is repeatable. It's not a sack. Little Field of Ruin, way of handling enemy non-basics. We know what that does, though. Generous Gift. It's the white Beast Within. So 2 and a white, instant, destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Good Fortune Unicorn, 1 green white for 2/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So your creatures come in with +1/+1 counters. I wonder if we're going to have Grimgrin in here as well. If not, Grimgrin would be a good addition. Hamza, Guardian of Arashkan, or of Arashan. 4 green and a white. It costs 1 less for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So this can get out of hand very quickly for a 5/5. Death Greeter's Champion, 2 in a red, dash 3 in a red, backup 1, double strike. Wait a minute. So you can keep dashing this? So with dash, you return it to your hand at the beginning of the end step. Backup, when it comes into play, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. If it's a different creature, it also gains all of the rest of the abilities. So that's pretty crazy. Wow. Civil Unrest. 4 in a red. Non-token creatures you control have Riot. They enter the battlefield with your choice of a +1/+1 counter or haste. As you can see, there's a ton of 1/1 counter synergies in this deck. If a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter, it would deal damage. To a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. That already combos with Shalai and Halar. Wow. I would say this probably should be a Shalai and Halar deck, not a Bright Palm deck. Iker Elixir. It's a mana rock specific for Plane Chase. So 4 mana gets you a rock that taps for 2 colorless. If you would roll 1 or more planar dice, instead roll that many +1 and ignore 1. So it's a good way to be able to manipulate what you get. For instance, if you want Chaos to ensue but don't want to Planeswalk, it's unlikely that you're going to hit double Planeswalk. So Mirror Style Master, 4 red. Backup 1. When this creature attacks, for each attacking modified creature you control, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that creature. Exile those tokens at end of combat. Wow. That is a very strong effect. Especially since it has backup, so you can throw that ability around a bit. Wow. Guardian Scale Lord. 4 and a white. backup 1, flying. When this creature attacks, return target non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is this creature's power. Whoa. So this and Mirror Scale Master together, we'd be able to get back a bunch of stuff. Emergent Wormwood, 6 and a green, backup 3. Whenever this creature attacks, or Woodworm, not Wormwood. Whenever this creature attacks, look at the top X cards of your library where X is its power. You may put a permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield, with the rest of the bottom of your library in any order. That is very powerful. Path of the Pyromancer, 4 and a red. Discard all cards in your hand, add a red for each card discarded this way, then draw that many cards +1. This synergizes extremely well with the Guardian Scale Lord. And with a number of other things. So it's effectively a one-sided wheel. Well, not a wheel per se, but it's Tolarian Winds in red, but it also gives you mana. Starting with you, each player votes for Planeswalk or Chaos. If Planeswalk gets more votes, Planeswalk. If Chaos gets more votes, or the vote is tied, Chaos ensues. It's also very powerful. All right, then we have Conclave Siege Captain. Looks like it's out of one of the Ravnica sets, but obviously it isn't because it has backup. So 5 and a green, backup 1, backup 1, backup 1. So you get to back up on to up to 3 creatures. Then trample. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Wow. Helonian Hydra. Now, from what I recall, this is one of the most expensive cards in the precons. So it's trample. When it is a reprint though. When it enters the battlefield, put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever it attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Whoa. That plus Shalayan Halar could get very dangerous very quickly. So could this. A Mikaeus the Lunarch, X and a white. When it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on it, tap, remove a +1/+1 counter from it, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Now, this has been very good in Commander in the past. I believe it'll continue. Then we've got Canopy Vista, Searchable Duel, Champion of Lamholt, another very strong card, especially with counter synergies. So for 1 green, you get a 1/1. Creatures with power less than Champion of Lamholt can't block creatures you control. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. So that turns, all of your creatures into this. When you have Shalayan Halar out, effectively gives you a free impact tremors. Because each creature you have enters, it creates a +1/+1 counter, and you get to deal a damage. Cinderglade, Searchable Duel. Dromoka's Command, a standard all-star from Dragons of Tarkir. So choose 2. Prevent all damage, and target instant or sorcery spell would deal this turn. Target player sacrifices an enchantment, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. For just a green and a white as an instant. Very strong. Excuse me. We have Exotic Orchard. Flame Rush Rider. 4 and a red for 3/3. Whenever it attacks, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature that's tapped and attacking. Exile the token at end of combat. Now this, plus anything with backup, will trigger backup so that you can spread more counters around and get more effects. So that is very powerful. Then you have Dash for 2 and 2 red. So 2 red. Very strong and repeatable. Flame Shadow Conjuring. 3 and a red. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay red. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. The token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. That and backup. Again, very powerful, very strong synergy. Forgotten Ancient. Whenever, so for 3 and a green, you get a 0/3. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. This already synergizes with Shalai and Halar. So they're going to get hit twice with it because, of course, you move all of the counters and either spread them around or move them to another creature. Fortified Village, we all know what that is. Fury Calm Snarl, another duel. Game Trail, duel. Gavany Township. Wow. Okay, so this getting a reprint is huge. This card at one point was over $20. I don't know what it's at this point. But this was originally from Avacyn Restored, if I remember correctly. It was at least from Innistrad, the original Innistrad block. You know that. And it has been an all-star ever since. So tap for a colorless, or for 2 green-white, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Very strong. Alright, then we have good old Genesis Hydra. X green-green. When you cast a spell, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle the rest into your library. It enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. Gyre Sage. 1 and a green. Evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 on this creature. And it has tap at a green for each +1/+1 counter on it. So this can get out of hand very quickly. Heaven and Earth. This is one of the Aftermath cards from... I can't remember if it was Amonkhet or Hour of Devastation. I want to say it was Amonkhet. But X and a green, it deals X damage to each creature with flying, so half of a hurricane. And then Earth, X red, it deals X damage to each creature without flying, so half of an earthquake. High Sentinels of Arishan, so 3 and a white, flying. High Sentinels of Arishan gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Then 3 and a white, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. We have good old Incubation Druid. This was a... it was either Ravnica Allegiance, Guilds of Ravnica, or War of the Spark. I don't remember which one. It was in one of those 3. But a huge mana ramp. Tapped, add 1 mana of any mana a land you control could produce. If it has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 of that type instead. And then it has adapt 3 for 3 green-green. We have Inscription of Abundance. 1 and a green, kicker, 2 and a green. Choose 1. If the spell is kicked, choose any number instead. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. Or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Very nice. Then we have Ion Storm. 2 and a red. Enchantment that does nothing on its own. For 1 and a red, remove a +1/+1 counter or a charge counter from a permanent you control to deal 2 damage to any target. So, not the best, not the worst. Kessig Wolfrun. Wow. This was a card so good that it had not only a standard deck, but a modern deck named after it. The modern deck has fallen out of favor, but the standard deck was absolutely amazing. So it taps for colorless, but X green-red, or red-green rather, target creature gets +X/+X and gains trample until end of turn. This plus double strikers is amazing. We have Krenko 10 Street Kingpin with updated art. Very interesting. When it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then create a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Krenko's power. This plus Kessig Wolfrun can be a lot of 1/1 goblins very quickly. We have Managorger Hydra. Whenever a player casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And it has trample. From experience of running this in standard from Magic Origins, this card got out of hand very quickly and got very silly very quickly. We have Mossfire Valley, filters for red-green. Mosswort Bridge, one of the original hideaway lands from Lorwyn. It comes into play tapped, tap for green, green and tap it. If you may play the exiled card from the hideaway without paying its mana cost if you control, or if creatures you control have total power 10 or greater. With the amount of +1/+1 counters you're throwing around in this should not take long. Resto Angel, with what appears to be new art. Classic among Kiki-Jiki combos. In fact, you could slot Kiki-Jiki in this deck easily, which would make this at least the second of these commander decks that is the case. So for 3 and a white, flash, flying, you get a 3/4. But the important part is, when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-angel creature you control, then return that creature to the battlefield under your control. Wow, another Kaladesh, maybe Aether Revolt. It was either Kaladesh or Aether Revolt. I think it was actually Aether Revolt. All-Star, we have Rishkar, Pima Renegade. So 2 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Each creature you control with a counter on it, that's any counter, has tap, add a green to your mana pool. Very strong. Semester's End, I believe this is from Strixhaven. So 3 and a white, instant. Exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of your next end step, return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty on it if it's a planeswalker. Now, keep in mind this is an instant, and you can use it to keep all of your creatures safe, either during your turn and get them back at the end of turn, or during your opponent's turn, and then they don't come back till the end of your next turn. So, something you can do with this is, if you have a board wipe, you can play this during your opponent's turn, untap into your turn, board wipe, like, say you block in combat, cast this during combat to exile all of your creatures and planeswalkers, or any ones that you don't want to die, and then when it comes back to your turn, board wipe, and then you get everything back at the end of your turn. Very strong effect. Strionic Resonator, 2 mana artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it to copy target triggered ability you control, and you can choose new targets for the copy. So this, along with things that add tons of counters, very powerful. I mean, that on its own combos with just about anything. Then we have Sungrass Prairie, filters for green-white. Sunscorch Regent, 3 white. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you gain 1 life. So basically, you are taxing on multiple creatures while you're growing your stuff whenever anyone whenever at least your opponents cast a spell, and some of them whenever anyone casts a spell. You have your Uncolored Temples. You have Together Forever, white enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, support 2. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. 1. Choose target creature with a counter on it. When that creature dies this turn, return that card to its owner's hand. Wow, that is very strong. Especially with something like Triskelion. It enters the battlefield with 6 mana, enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. You can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to deal 1 damage to any target. This can likely be upgraded to Walking Ballista. Walking Ballista, in almost all cases, does the exact same thing, and is actually a little bit easier to combo with. So you would likely want to add like Kiki-Jiki, Walking Ballista, Heliod, and improve the lands in this deck. And you have a very formidable counter strategy. But this could just easily be a 1-for-1 swap with Walking Ballista. Hindervines, 2 and a green, instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures with no +1/+1 counters on it. This can be a very strong one-sided fog. Inspiring Call, 2 and a green, instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. That's fun. Jungle Shrine, it is the Wedge land. for Naya, this could be upgraded to a Jetmir's Garden pretty easily. Juniper Order Druid, 3 green white. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and a +1/+1 counter on Juniper Order Druid, or Ranger, not Druid. Crimson Verge, old school fetch, can be upgraded with a real fetch. In this case, that would be Windswept Heath. Llanowar Reborn, it's a graft land. Comes into play tapped, you can tap it for a green. It's graft 1. Enters with a +1/+1 counter on it, and when you have it, whenever a creature comes in, you can move that +1/+1 counter from this to that creature. Mindless Automaton, 4 mana. Enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. 1, discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it, remove 2 +1/+1 counters from it, draw a card. This is an engine with a lot of the other +1/+1 synergies, so you can keep piling counters on it and drawing extra cards. Rogue's Passage, we all know what that does. Slurk All Ingesting, 5 and a green, legendary ooze. Enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters. When it or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that has a +1/+1 counter on it. It has Partner to go along with the other partner creature. So I guess you could drop red and just run those two as your thing, but Ally and Halar are just ridiculous, so why wouldn't you? Just run that. Good old Soul Ring. Swords to Plowshares, one of the best pieces of removal ever made. Temple of the False Gods. Semi-mana ramp and colorless. Then we have some plains. Only 2 mountains. And some forests. We have our Bright Palm, Soul Awakener, cardboard card. We have some tokens. Let's see, a little less diverse tokens than some of the other decks, but we have Flying 1/1 Spirit. On the backside, they're treasures. We've got 4 goblins. On the backside, they are slivers. Okay, I'm guessing that's for the Plane Chase cards that are in this. We have an elephant that is the city's blessing. Very nice. We have butterflies. We have 3 butterflies. Really cool token. And then more cities blessings. Why do we need more than 1 city's blessing token? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. And reminder card. Now let's look at our Plane Chase cards, our double-sized cards. Overall, really cool token strategy. A lot of opportunity for upgrades, and also just pretty playable on its own. But I would definitely add a Heliod. Definitely add a few other token synergy things. Upgrade the lands and add like Kiki-Jiki. And probably a Hardened Scales and an Ozolith. And the new Ozolith would slot really well into this as well. Other things to just ramp up the number of +1/+1 counters you get would be great. I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, that's the big stuff off the top of my head. Maybe improve some of the mana rocks. Like I noticed there aren't any signets in this. They might be interested in doing that. Let's see what we have. So he's starting off. We have the phenomenon Chaotic Aether. When you encounter it, each blank roll of the planar die is a chaos roll until a player planeswalks away from a plane. Then planeswalk away from this phenomena. That is something. That is a very powerful phenomenon. Okay, there. We have Jund on Alara. Gend, of course, being one of the wedges on Alara. Whenever a player casts a spell that's red, black, red, or green, it gains Devour 5. As the creature enters the battlefield, its controller may sacrifice any number of creatures. The creature enters the battlefield with 5 times that many +1/+1 counters on it. That can get really silly really fast, especially with what we're playing. And then whenever chaos ensues, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Bloodhill Bastion. This is on Equilar. Or Equilor. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it gains double strike and haste until end of turn. Ooh, that's nutty. Whenever chaos ensues, exile target non-token creature you control, then return to the battlefield under your control. Oof. Karasha Foothills. This is on Mong Seng. Not sure which plane that is. Whenever a creature you control attacks a player, for each other opponent, you may create a token that's a copy of that creature tapped and attacking that opponent. Exile those tokens at the beginning of the next end step. Huh. That does some interesting stuff with legendaries too. Whenever chaos ensues, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. If you do, it deals that much damage to target creature. Okay, that's not very good. Grove of the Dream Pods. This one was always pretty nutty back in the old Duel of the Planeswalkers games. Whenever you planeswalk to Grove of the Dream Pods, and at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's effectively Oath of Druids. Except it always happens. Whenever chaos ensues, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, definitely an interesting one. And that's on Fabuson. Alright, then we have Megaflora Jungle. This is on Gargantikar. Each creature with mana value 2 or less gets +2/+2. Whenever chaos ensues, create a 1/1 green insect creature token with flying named Butterfly. That's where the tokens are for. Okay. We have Riptide Island. When you planeswalk to Riptide Island, this is on Dominaria. Whenever you planeswalk to Riptide Island, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create 2 1/1 colorless sliver creature tokens. Okay, that makes sense. Why we have the sliver tokens. Whenever chaos ensues, slivers you control gain haste and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of slivers you control. Oh no. We have the Great Eyrie, and this is on the plane of Tarkir. When you planeswalk to the Great Eyrie, and at the beginning of your upkeep, bolster 3. Whenever chaos ensues, choose up to 1 target creature you control and up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. Each of those creatures deals damage equal to its toughness to the other. Wow. We have the Golden City of Orazca. This is on the plane of Ixalan. Ascend. If you control 10 or more... that's why you need it. Need the tokens, because all players could get it. Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Then draw a card if you have the city's blessing. Wow, that's really strong. Whenever chaos ensues, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Whoa. And then we have Tawashi from the plane of Kamigawa. Modified creatures you control have trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card. Whenever chaos ensues, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control. Very strong. Very pretty art, too. Alright. So, another really cool set from Plane Chase. Very interesting Naya deck centered around +1/+1 counters and a lot of upgrade paths for it. So, something that's probably worthwhile picking up. But as always, thank you for joining me on this adventure. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Best way to help out the channel in a non-monetary fashion. If you want to help out the channel in a monetary fashion, we have our Patreon, which is linked in our About page. And we also have an email in case you want to sponsor videos. Our first sponsored video actually went up yesterday. Today as of filming, but this will be going up tomorrow. So something to consider. But until next time, stay awesome. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.